Moving down to the cab, big thing on the front, plenty of noise, big whistle, and then into the cab. And we now look at the controls that we have here. 2 gauges on the top. The one on the left hand side is a pressure gauge, so that's the pressure of the steam that's actually within the boiler. And there's a red line on this at 90, and that's the maximum pressure this boiler has been tested to have steam in. So at 90, the excess steam will be let out of the safety valves that we were looking at earlier on. The other gauge is for the vacuum, and we use vacuum brakes. So whereas normal brakes these days are air brakes where you have high pressure air pushing brakes on, we have vacuum holding the brakes off, and when the vacuum is released, the natural air pressure from around applies the brakes. So the vacuum is generated by a natural process of passing steam over a venturi and sucking air in, which is a vacuum, and that creates the vacuum. So it's a simple integral part of a steam engine. Modern trains don't have steam engines to do that, so they have to have high pressure air pumps and the like to produce that braking pressure. So key thing is the regulator. The regulator literally adjusts the amount of steam going into the cylinders. The further around you push that, the more steam you put into the cylinders, the faster the locomotive will go. And typically of a steam locomotive, do that too quickly and all that happens is the wheels spin. So part of the skill of driving is to feel the way the engine's working and be gradual with it. And if ever you've seen any old films of trains in the station trying to pull away from the terminus, the moment a wheel spin, they have to shut off, because steel wheels spinning on steel rails actually end up melting the top of the rails. So to avoid that, they have to shut off straight away and then gently apply it. It's usually a sign of a rookie driver or an over-enthusiastic driver. A well-skilled driver, unless he's gone over a bit of grease or something, would never let his wheels spin, because it's wasting steam, wasting energy, stops the train moving. There's a whole range of things that are negative with spinning wheels. Below the regulator, we've got 2 separate water gauges. This is actually showing us the level of the water that's inside the boiler. We never want the boiler full, because if it's full, there's a risk of water being taken into the steam pipes, and if you put water into those cylinders, we have a thing that's called hydraulicking. You can't compress water, so the piston would be moving and would try and compress that water, and in fact what happens is that it actually breaks the cylinders. So you can split a cylinder, it can break the end of the caps off. So it's important that we keep the water at a decent level, halfway to 3/4 level, and that gives us plenty of room for steam, but also plenty of water in the boiler. If it gets down to the bottom nut, we're getting to the point of it being dangerous, because that now means that the water level is below the top of the fire, and that means the fire can start heating the metalwork of the boiler above its safe working temperature. We have a valve on the bottom, so we can actually let the water out, and if it was under pressure that would blow out quickly, but it cleans the water out and checks that we haven't got an airlock and that the water's not sitting there giving us a false reading. For safety, we've got 2 stop cocks, so if that glass was to break on that one, we can shut these cocks off. That closes the gap into the boiler, and we can carry on running with 1 gauge. So that's built-in safety. We've got 2 gauges just in case one goes wrong. This locomotive is fitted with a fairly meaty handbrake. and that's all that is. It's a screw to break it on. Over here, which looks like a very old-fashioned handbrake, is actually the valve adjuster. So in the position here, it is in neutral, so if we open the regulator, the engine won't go in either direction. We push it forward and the locomotive will go forward, put it back and the locomotive will go in reverse. There are a couple of positions each way in the middle of that, and that simply allows us to carry on cruising but cutting off using the steam. If you were driving a motorcycle or a car, you accelerate and you take your foot off and you keep the same speed. So you're using less petrol or diesel. Same thing applies with a steam engine. Once you're underway, you can actually reduce the amount of steam you're using but still maintain that speed. On the side, we've got two valves on standpipes. Opening them opens a water valve, and that allows water in to an injector, and the water is dropping out of what is called an injector. If we then open this is a steam valve for an injector. Steam would go through that little unit, and because it's under pressure and passing across the top of the flow, it creates a process of passing through a venturi, and it then draws the water up into the boiler. It's an extremely technical but amazing piece of equipment, and I'm not going to attempt to describe the functioning of it to you, because by using boiler pressure you can actually inject water into the boiler at the same pressure and open a valve that's held down by the same pressure. So there's black magic going on there, and I think that's probably the best thing, and once you get used to it you'll start to understand it a bit more. Having driven model steam engines for 40 years, it's still black magic to me, so I think that's the best way to leave it. So the other valve on the cab floor is a vacuum brake valve. So this is fed with the vacuum from the valve up the top here. We're seeing the vacuum. If we pull it over, it goes to the on position. That puts the brakes on, and if we go forward, that takes the brakes off. And we'll see the gauge move according to the position of that. On the top, the other valves here, we've got the what's called a blower valve. This is actually putting steam, blowing it directly up the chimney and creating what I was talking about earlier on, the vacuum to pull the fire through. So when an engine's not running and it's sitting idle, the fire will actually calm down, and if you're not careful, the fire will actually go out because there's no airflow through it. So by opening the blower and creating that vacuum at the far end, it draws air through the tubes of the fire all the time, and that keeps the fire burning well. Lever in the middle is the whistle valve. So some locomotives have a chain, some have a different, they're all different, but this particular one is a lever nicely in the middle of the manifold there. So, firebox door. So this is the firebox. I'm not sure whether you can see the tubes or the grate in there, but it is just like any old coal fire at home. If you've got a coal fire, or you've even seen one in these recent years, there's a metal grate at the bottom, and directly in front are the tubes going the length of the boiler. So we've filled that up with coal. The heat from that is drawn down the pipes, and so every tube has got heat going through it, so the surface area of heat in the boiler is far, far greater by having all those tubes in there than if it was just one big tube down the middle. crucial things as a driver, we've got to have a good fire all the time, plenty of water and plenty of track to go and play trains on.